Welcome in. It's February and thanks for coming back. Appreciate seeing all your faces. Just let folks get here. Hey, Nick, thanks for the wave. I keep thinking I wish I was with people in person more often than I am these days.
Hi, Angie. I'm so sorry. This is Adil Mahmood from the California Air Resources Board. I had some technical difficulties getting in.
I'm glad you're here. You'll be up in about 10 minutes, okay?
Thank you so much.
All right, thanks. All right, well, I think folks are coming on in. I want to say hi. I'm Angie Hacker. I'm with the California Climate and Energy Collaborative, and Rochelle and I are here with the SEEK team to welcome you back. This is our 38th meeting of the Local Energy Resources Network. It feels like a whole lifetime ago since our last meeting in January, at least when it comes to funding access, but a lot of other issues as well, I'm sure you're feeling out there. Yeah, like I said, I wish we could be all together a little bit more often. I'm giving out a lot of hugs these days. I hope you're okay. I do think a lot of you are probably like me, turning pretty quickly from mad to mobilizing. And some of you have joined me for some huddles that we have formed in response to stuff like the federal funding freeze. So we are really fortunate to spend some time on that conversation today with a guest from the Lawyers for Good Government. So that's going to be a big part of the meat of the conversation today, along with a little spotlight from our friends at CARB. And so that's what's on the plate today. I want to invite you all to please introduce yourself over chat. And if you are comfortable, share with us whether or not you're experiencing any immediate challenges drawing down federal funds. Okay, so that's the assignment in the chat, and we're just happy to see y'all. All right, let's go into it. As always, we have this 1 hour together to try to help you access opportunities to help you advance your energy and climate goals. We're going to run through our opportunity roundtable like we always do. We'll hear from a spotlight from CARB, and then, like I said, Lawyers for Good Government on the funding freeze with a focus on ways to take action. And then, as always, we don't want you to stress about taking notes. You're always going to get the slides, recording, and other meeting materials afterwards. And you can check things out. We're going to drop some items in the chat as we go along and discuss. Okay, so let's go ahead and dive into our opportunity roundtable. It's so nice to see you all. Introducing yourself over chat. And actually, like we always do here, this is an opportunity roundtable, meaning if you know of other opportunities, now more than ever is a really great time to help each other out and make sure we're aware of the resources, funding opportunities that are still available. And things are changing, right? It's not a surprise. But like always, this is sort of the messy sheet we use to give you a hyperlink cheat sheet, and you are welcome to dive in further. I'm just going to highlight a couple of things on this list today, and those are the things we haven't talked about in previous meetings. One of those is just to raise up that among all the policy things happening in the world, we also have the governor's proposed budget out. And I think if you're like me, you're thinking, really we need some stability at the state level these days, feeling somewhat grateful to be here in California. And so what the 2025-26 California budget that's proposed by Governor Newsom is saying is that there's a small positive balance of $363 million, which is sort of good news after 2 years of state budget deficit. So this was just released on January 10th. It projects $16.5 billion in additional revenue compared to estimates from last June. Although there's, caveats here to say we know that some of the economic policy decisions at the federal level may affect state revenue streams, and federal policies are obviously going to affect federal flow down of funds. So I think this is a moving target. So there are $229 billion in general fund spending that would protect investments made in prior years. So the kind of the key message I think is right now, status quo. And it also talks about, in terms of climate, the budget allocates about $2.7 billion in climate bond spending. So of that $10 billion Prop 4 climate budget, or I'm sorry, climate prop. 2.7 billion of that is going to be in 2025-26. I went to a really encouraging workshop on Prop 4 that happened a week or two ago, and there's more engagement to come, and I'll make sure to alert you all. There's going to be surveys and workshops, and they really want to figure out how to deploy these dollars in a more effective way. But it's not a lot there, to be honest, at least what I'm seeing right now in terms of clean energy, which I know we could use some additional resources for. I do see 325 million for wildfire prevention and for some backup energy generation, extra dollars for that as well. So I wish we could see a little bit more for emission reductions and clean energy. And I think what we're seeing is some backfilling of the general fund cuts with things like Prop 4. So some impacts, I think a lot of voters were hoping to see some additive value out of Prop 4, but we are seeing some backfilling. Okay, so that's on the budget, and I'd be really interested if anybody wanted to share other thoughts on their interpretation of this sort of first run at a state budget, or if folks are out there trying to influence it. All right, but let's talk about funding opportunities. The first one I want to talk to you about is really just a heads up. CEC's REACH 3.0. This is a reliable, equitable, accessible charging for multifamily housing program. Just want to make sure you saw that the deadline got extended. So it's due in 3 days, February 14th. One that we haven't talked about before is relevant to some of you. Cal EPA has an Environmental Justice Action Grant, round 2, due February 28th. It's for tribes, community-based organizations, and residents to engage in emergency preparedness, public health protection, environmental and climate decision-making, and coordinated enforcement efforts affecting their community. It's a 2-year grant up to $300,000 per project and $500,000 per applicant per fiscal year. I have some folks I work with that have been working in this grant, and I think Flux might be a relatively new granting platform for some of you, and you may want to engage in early to work out the kinks. So Cal EPA, that one may be on some of your list. Another one here, this one is, let's see. So we have Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. It's local data for equitable climate grants. Call for proposals. This one's not a very big one. I want to say it's like $50,000. It's due March 18th. But for those of you that are getting concerned about some of the data access issues and want to do some of your work locally, this might be something for you all to look at. I do want to share with you here in the chat, and if you've been part of my huddles already, you maybe have already seen it. This is my federal energy and climate funding updates and resources where I've been attempting to track. So in the blue there, I'm attempting to track sort of the latest information, guidances, relevant, official documents on the funding freeze primarily right now. So this is for you if you want a simpler place to kind of look at what I'm capturing. And you're also welcome to help. If there's other things you've come across you think folks like you would benefit from having access to, we welcome you to send us a note or just drop a comment or insert it directly. Okay, so on that, but that's blue, right? Because that's our main topic of today. So we're not going to talk too much about that until our guest speaker helps us out. And then I just want to give you a heads up about 2 opportunities for engagement that are coming. Like I said, Prop 4, there was a lot of enthusiasm. So there's going to be more engagement about the deployment of Prop 4. And I think with the LA fires and this really big interest in cost cutting and red tape cutting and getting funds where they're needed fast, that enthusiasm is flowing over to this Prop 4 conversation. And I think a lot of us have been talking about funding access and finding better and more effective and streamlined ways to get dollars out. So I'm excited about that conversation, and I'll let you all know when there's those become official and there's dates available. I also have been talking with some of the agencies who are involved in Solar for All. We don't know. Solar for All was awarded to actually iBank and Grid Alternatives here in California. So I think there's an award executed pretty recently. And I don't know the exact status of it right now. I just know that EPA in general, Solar for All, has been a difficult program right now. But what I had heard is that they were prepping for workshops, public engagement workshops, so that we can help guide the design of that program, of those two recipients here in California. But at least at the state level, they're working on some workshops. Okay, so those are the main roundtable options or opportunities I wanted to share with you all. Like I said, if you know of others, please help us out. Share them with your friends, drop it in the chat. It helps us when everybody's sort of looking out for each other. Okay, I would love to now move on to a spotlight. So let's go to our next, yes. So Adil Mahmood, did I say that correctly? I'm sorry if I did not, but he is the staff
Oh,
air
it's
pollution
perfect.
specialist. Did it? All right. Yay me. Okay. Staff air pollution specialist with CARB, and he works in the advanced clean fleet section. And he and his supervisor, I believe, have come to us asking if they could provide you all with an update. They are very aware of the turmoil going on in advanced clean fleets and EVs, and thought it would be useful to come with some updates from California Air Resources Board. So I'll leave it up to you. Thanks for being here.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. And I apologize for not being on camera today. I'm out in the field at an event, but I didn't want to miss the opportunity to just provide a brief update. There's been a lot of questions lately about the waiver status of advanced clean fleets, and I just wanted to discuss that a little further. If we could go to the next slide, please. So, as you may be aware, California has withdrawn its request for a waiver for the Advanced Clean Fleets regulation. This occurred last month. Um, so CARB is not enforcing existing portions of the regulation that require a federal waiver, such as the portions that apply to high priority fleets and grayage fleets. However, not all portions of the regulation require a federal waiver, such as the state and local government. And I we wanted to stress that the state and local government fleets portion of the regulation remains unaffected. And there is an upcoming reporting date. The reporting period starts March 1st this year, and with a deadline of April 1st. And that's for the default pathway to comply is a purchase schedule. Fleets that opt into the second compliance option had a reporting period in January. So if you are following that second set of milestones option, I encourage you to report your vehicles immediately. And I just links in the presentation that include instructions on how to report using the truckers system, and then also a link to fact sheets if you need any more information regarding the regulation. And also our email address is fleet@arb.ca.gov, where you could send all your compliance and reporting questions. They're pretty good about getting back to people really quickly. And the main update the main takeaway I wanted to leave everyone with today, and is just to help clear up that confusion about us withdrawing the waiver. Yes, that did happen, but the state and local government portions of the regulation are still in effect. So thank you so much for the time. I understand that was a brief update. If in the future there's interest in us providing a more detailed presentation about elements of the regulation, we'd be happy to do that. And thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks so much for being here. Does anybody have a question before we move into our main subject? All right. Great. Thank you so much. He dropped the email address that you can contact them with additional questions. That's right there in the chat. So thanks for that. Always appreciate when our agencies come to us and ask for some time to reach you. So, all right, let's move into our next conversation. Okay, I am really deeply grateful to introduce our next guest, Jillian Blanchard. She is Lawyer for Good Government's Vice President of Climate Change and Environmental Justice. She's a nationally recognized attorney in energy and natural resources law, worked in all levels of government, nonprofit, and private sector for about 20 years. And actually, I didn't know this until I read your bio, but in 2018, she helped craft Governor Newsom's climate change platform as part of his re-election campaign. So interesting. So she's an expert here, and she's here to talk to us more about what Lawyers for Good Government are doing to try to support folks on the ground really reeling with the federal funding freeze. So I think we're gonna get some updates. We'll talk about some actions. Put your questions for Jillian as she's talking in the chat, and then we'll get to those when she's done, okay? All right, Jillian, thank you so much. I'll leave it to you.
Thanks, Angie. And I want to make sure you have the most updated version of the slides. I was not able to share. I mean, I'm happy to share on my end if that's easier.
You know, it might be. If you want to go
Okay.
ahead and just share your screen.
All right, will do. Hang on one second. Let me get myself in presentation mode and see if I can do that. Yep. There we go. How does that look?
Looks good.
And so thank you all for having me. It's wonderful to be here. Jillian Blanchard. I am living in California myself. I am a long-term energy and regulatory attorney here in California. So I feel for everyone that is dealing with the current changes in the administration, but also feel it very deeply at home here in California with you all. You'll see on my slides, it says safeguarding federal funding update as of February 11th, because literally things are changing every single day. So what I'm going to do is give you an update to the best of my ability on what we know now, and answer questions to the best of my ability on what we know now, and give you some guided actions that Angie actually has already compiled a great list of many of these in the documents that she shared with you, and they'll be here as well. There's also live links in this, so we're happy to share out the slideshow with you, Angie, afterwards, so that you can share it with the group, so that people can access this at their leisure. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Lawyers for Good Government, but also our really important partners in this space, Environmental Protection Network, who are working very closely, hand in glove with on a lot of this guidance, and our friends at NRDC as well, and Communities First, if you're familiar with them. So we've been thinking about this potential scenario planning, unfortunately, for months, which the good news is that makes us fairly ahead of the game in being able to provide you all with some support, some guidance, and some resources. This is who we are. If you're not familiar with Lawyers for Good Government, we were actually formed. The Climate Change and Environmental Justice program that I lead was actually formed the day the Trump 1.0 announced withdrawal from the Paris Accord. And since then, we've been leveraging our over 125,000 legal advocates in all 50 states to really work in areas where lawyers can make a difference, to protect the rule of law. And in the CCEJ space, or the climate change and environmental justice space that most of us live in, we have been working for a long time to expedite the just transition to a green economy, have provided guidance to over 700 municipalities and communities on the IRA, on the IIJA, and represent communities right now, helping them access and leverage these federal funds, and at the moment, keep these federal funds. So let's go into the potential vulnerabilities that I know you already know, but this is kind of to level set the frame of things that we're already seeing and things we may see soon. This is what we had flagged months ago as potential vulnerabilities. So it's not surprising, although it is painful to see this playing out in real time. The funds that are not awarded or obligated and were merely announced are having a hard time getting to the award stage. Those that have been awarded, as we're all seeing, is the federal funding freeze and other impacts from staff layoffs, administrative leave, many folks, 171, for example, at EPA being put on administrative leave for diversity, being related to diversity, equity, and inclusion programs, regulatory freezes, et cetera, that are being used and leveraged in a meritless way to try and freeze federal funding. And I'm going to talk directly about that because I know that's what you're probably all facing very quickly in a moment. But at a high level, we also anticipate seeing more investigations, inquiries, and audits. So if you are working with nonprofits and you yourself are a federal grantee, brace yourself for those types of things. We have resources at L4GG with our partners that we're going to be rolling out to help prepare you for those things. Obviously, the decreased staff means delay in funding of those programs that are still going. So that is normal. That is something to be expected. And in your budget planning, you should try and contemplate those things. On the tax credit side, if folks who are leveraging direct pay to help pay for their projects, we don't anticipate a full repeal of the tax credits, although that is potential. We don't anticipate that at all because they do enjoy currently fairly bipartisan support. However, the reconciliation bill is going forward right now regarding tax credits. And so we're tracking it very closely to see what's happening on the ground and what will ultimately get incorporated and what could pass both houses of Congress and the presidency. As folks may know, but it just bears repeating, tax credits are written into the tax code. They are safe until the law changes. So that's great news for folks who want to rely on tax credits like direct pay for their solar and wind projects, for their EV charging, EV infrastructure. Again, there are some decreases in staff at Treasury that have and Department of Energy that have caused some delays in funding, but you are entitled to that funding. And they have to pay interest if you file correctly and they miss the deadline for getting back to you in 45 days after the end of your first deadline. We've got a guidance document right there, so you don't need to remember anything that I just told you. It is all right there in the guidance brief for you to track along. Let's dive into what I know most of you are grappling with right now, the IRA and the IIJA federal funding freeze. There are two ongoing lawsuits that we've been tracking very, very closely, one filed by the 22 state attorneys general, there's a typo there, apologies, and the NGO coalition, as well as the relevant executive orders that are being used to provide guidance that is causing this federal funding. I want to take a level set moment, and for those of you who are with us, Angie, when I was reporting in from the airport last week, I was referencing this a little bit, so apologies for those that may be hearing this twice. But essentially, an executive order is a directive from the federal government to their federal agencies. The executive only has the authority that the executive is entitled to, and the executive, for a 101 civics lesson for any of us, only has the authority to enforce the laws. They do not have the authority to change the law. So if something is in law and has been approved by Congress, like the IRA and the IIJA, the executive alone cannot change that law. It takes another act of Congress to change it. So it's just good to keep in mind that when executive orders come out, they may say a lot, but they are really only able to change things within the executive's authority. And that is the ongoing battle that's playing out in the courts. What is the executive authority to do these federal funding freezes when it involves congressionally approved and authorized federal funding that is in legally obligated completed awards? Really important legal questions. To date, the judge has sided with the plaintiffs, the attorneys general, and the NGO coalition to say you're absolutely right. Any attempts to freeze federal funding on policy grounds would be unconstitutional. However, they haven't fully reviewed the merits of the case. So what they do in the interim is they try and pause everything while they review the merits to try and avoid what's called irreparable harm. And so that's where we are supposed to be right now. In fact, there was not only a temporary restraining order issued on January 31st, but because the federal agencies, as many of you have probably experienced, if you have a CPRG subaward or a community change grant award, your ASAP account might have been paused and then restarted and then paused again. What is happening on the ground is the federal agency is looking for ways to move the goalpost and find new justifications for freezing this federal funding. And the judge in the AG's case in particular continues to say, no, you must stop this. And so on Friday, some of you, if you had checked your ASAP, might have been able to access it. And then suddenly on Monday, closed again. That was closed again because of the federal agency's move, like for community change grants in APA, to say, well, we are complying with the temporary restraining order, but we are now concerned about fraud and waste and other things. And there was an internal memo. So they're using that to try and pause, again, federal funding, even in the face of a very, very clearly written, worded order on February 10th, yesterday. So if you have the stomach for it, it's only 5 pages. It is very reassuring that says you cannot pause IRA and IIJA federal funding while this lawsuit is ongoing. However, as I just mentioned, the federal agencies are trying hard to find other reasons to pause the funding, whether it's fraud, waste, meritless claims of other things, while they continue the lawsuit. I will also say they immediately filed an appeal to the appellate level to review that enforcement order, which is very frustrating for all of you, I know. But rest assured that the plaintiffs, with our help and lots of others, are pushing forward strongly to get these pauses on pauses to actually be implemented. So continue to the extent that you can to check your ASAP accounts. Continue to report to us. I'm going to give you some direct actions in a second. But we need to know directly what's happening to you and to your grantees on the ground. It really helps us give you good guidance and also win these lawsuits. So it's a really good thing to kind of continue to share your stories. We at L4GG will keep them anonymous and until you tell us you want to share your story to a reporter, to a litigating team, whatever. In the meantime, we keep it anonymous and just share guidance with you. So we'll be tracking the appeal. We'll let you know what happens. It is essentially egregious. And from our perspective, the delay is the point. They want to starve you out. They want to make it so difficult that these programs have to fold, even if you win on the merits. So I'm sorry this is happening, and we're doing everything we can to stop it. Current state of play in a more evergreen guidance brief is there. It does not track each individual litigation because they are moving so quickly, but it is more of a overview on what is impoundment, what is constitutionally allowed, what is not allowed, so that you are armed with the facts. This is the support that we are providing at L4GG and EPN with our partners at NRDC and Communities First. We have already provided preclinical support getting people to award. Tomorrow is going to be our first webinar to help you stay in compliance. The number one thing you can do if you have a grant is to review those terms and conditions and stay in compliance to the best of your ability. If you cannot stay in compliance because your federal funding has been frozen, we have an email template for that. And Angie, I've shared some, but I'm going to go ahead and share that table as soon as it's done, and so that your folks can have it. With the huge caveat that this is not legal advice, and that you should absolutely take that template and tailor it as appropriate to your specific grant and terms. But let's talk about webinars and workshops. L4GG, in partnership with EPN and a consulting firm that's helping with compliance, TRC, is going to be offering a workshop and webinar series. So tomorrow we have one on financial compliance, because we know that's tricky. The first little bit, we're going to provide an update on what folks can do immediately, but also we're then going to spend the rest of the workshop. TRC is going to go over with Forensic Groundworks, like how do you set up your financial best practices so that you can stay in compliance. That's tomorrow. The webinar link is here in the slides, and I'll share it with you too, Angie. Secondly, the second one we're going to do is on the 26th around procurement and BABA DBRA compliance, because we know that's tricky. So when you are able to issue those bid documents and RFPs, we want to make sure that they have the requisite language to make sure you stay in compliance. We're going to offer another webinar in March to address the investigations and process that you may, unfortunately, some people may have to deal with, and give you some, tools and ammunition to defend yourself. We are then going to train our attorneys, and we have that will be launching in March to offer even more one-on-one support to grantees who have specific questions around these things. In the meantime, our lean, mean group of experts within L4GG, with the help of a small group of pro bono experts, have been answering all these questions, and we will continue to do our best to do so. We've also been offering office hours in partnership with EPN, where you can kind of come in based on the grant that you are associated with and ask your questions. You'll see links to the EPA cohorts that we currently have ongoing. And then we'll ultimately offer that one-on-one assistance I was just referencing in March, later in March. Okay, this is the assistance that's available to you right now. If you are using clean energy tax credits, as I mentioned, they are written into the tax code. They are not being subject to this federal funding freeze. They are available, and the more that we can use for 2024 projects, the more likely they will stick around and be safe. So I just want to push, please, when you have a project that is eligible, we are here to help. We have built an entire interactive tool, free website, the Clean Energy Tax Navigator, that you can go to, enter your specific project details, and get preliminary determinations on your eligibility for what type of tax credit you might be able to get, and filing guidance to file for that tax credit. You are entitled to that money, and it may become more and more important to really rely on those tax credits as opposed to some of the grants that are dealing with this stop-start situation on federal funding. On the federal funding grant part, as I mentioned, we have this ongoing fund protection clinic. Started in February. It's going to be enhanced even more in March with the one-on-one, where we're working directly with grantees. So that live link under clinic is to our legal intake request form. If you have questions about stop work orders, or questions about compliance, or your ASAP has been frozen, or you just want to be informed, use that clinic intake request. Tell us what you need. It will help us in so many ways, give you, number one, the exact guidance you need. Number two, keep you informed of webinars and other resources as they become available. And number three, we can provide anonymized statistics to these litigators in lawsuits to really provide facts on the ground that help us win these cases. It's already been used to great effect. So all those reasons, we want to make sure you get the guidance you need. Please fill out that form if you have those questions. In addition, our friends at EPN are doing incredible work right now. If you have not gotten to award, they can still help you with some of that filing to hopefully get to award. That's a harder road, but we still want to act as if the law that Congress approved is still in place. So EPN and TRC can help you with that. The links to the different programs, the CPRG, Community Change Grant, Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, those Solar for All folks. We are running cohorts right now that you can join. I've already connected Angie, one person from last week's, into the Solar for All cohort so that you can just stay up to date, hear what other grantees are dealing with and how they're managing their issues. It's really, really helpful for folks. And then EPN can also keep you updated with their technical assistance form. So if you want kind of the technical assistance with an EPA grant, that isn't really a legal question, it's more compliance, fill out that technical assistance form. Pretty soon, we're going to have one form to make life easy for you all, but because we work so closely together, if you reach out to one, it'll get to us. If you reach out to us, it'll get to them as needed. All right. Finally, actions that you can take right now. So if this happens, your funds are not awarded or obligated, we want you to contact EPN to help you reach final award. If your funds have been awarded, but they're not being allocated or dispersed, or you're getting a stop work order or some kind of pause, please complete that form, stay informed. And there is a template email there to your program officer, but I would recommend you just complete your form with your situation before you use that template. That template is just for folks who are stuck in ASAP and want to record for their administrative record, I can't access my ASAP and these are the harms that it's causing. So that won't apply to all of you. So don't automatically use that email template that's linked there. Instead, complete the form. We will send you a direct email with the right template to use. And then if you're interested, register for tomorrow's financial compliance webinar. You do have to get a particular link. We're very protective in that we're only letting folks in who are grantees to attend the financial compliance webinar. This is a safe space where people can share what they're going through. So don't register if you're not a federal funding grantee, but if you are, please register, and then you'll get your own individual link to attend. We're going to have breakout groups based on the type of grant you're concerned about, and going around to kind of ask questions, and again, kind of have that cohort feel so that folks can really bond in the trenches over what we're all dealing with. And then I'm going to put my lawyer hat on and say it has never, ever, ever been more important to document everything you do. Every email you might get from a program officer, screenshot it, download it. Every communication you send to a project officer, save it, put it in a file. Every effort you make to comply, save it, put it in a file. Every effort you make to access ASAP funds, save it and put it in a file. This will become so incredibly relevant if ultimately you do need to bring a lawsuit to defend your rights. What I like to call it is like the legal chronology. You save it, just take the extra minute at that time and just add it to your chronology. So you have an ongoing chronology that you can use. It will become helpful in so many different ways. So that's my plea. And then separately, if you have some success stories or you want to talk to your local electeds, that's very, very important right now for them to hear just how powerful and transformative these laws are in our communities. They need to know what jobs are being lost. They need to know what will happen if they don't stand up to this administration, if they don't tell this administration no and push back, because ultimately it's really going to be based up to the courts and Congress to stop the administration's unlawful efforts to claw back this funding. So share your story with your local elected if you're willing, and we have help. Lillette Consulting is being paid by a funder to help you in formulating your talking points, to get you in contact with the folks you need to get in contact with. That is their intake form right there. And then if you have more of the direct pay success stories, share it there with Atlas Public Policy or Climate Power. The link right there will take you right to Atlas Public Policy, who is collecting primarily on behalf of local governments, but others as well. And then again, if you complete that form and we're able to anonymize your story, or alternatively, if you want to share your story with your name attached, all of that is great, great assistance to the litigators to help uplift these stories and win lawsuits. And that, Angie, is it. So I will stop sharing and take questions.
Thank you so much, Jillian. There are some emojis or something in the chat, because Lawyers for Good Government, like, look how much they're doing here that really wouldn't exist without them. We really appreciate it. We're going to spend some time here on Q&A, and some of you have dropped some questions in the chat. In fact, somebody here, and we'll get to that in a second. We'll start with Q&A, and then we'll get to this. Juan has a question that I have too. What happens if the administration chooses to ignore the courts as they have indicated they will?
Right. It is a really good question that's already been tested. The plaintiffs believe, the attorneys general believe, that the defendants ignored the order, the first temporary restraining order, by continuing to freeze ASAP accounts. And on Friday, they issued a request of the court to enforce that order. And that was issued on Monday. And that is what the defendants are now appealing. So ultimately, it's going to go up the chain as court cases do. So it's at the district court level now. It would go to the appellate level court to be challenged. It potentially could get to the Supreme Court if the Supreme Court elects to take it on. It does not have to. But at each time, at each level, there is a court order that essentially defendants could be called in contempt of court if they fail to comply. What they're doing now is they're just trying to move the ball and say, well, I'm complying with this order, but I'm now pausing the funding for these reasons instead, to try and move the ball. But it's a really important question, and the reason we're paying such close attention, because if they don't comply with the court order, it's a constitutional crisis. It's basically them saying, we don't believe that the court has the constitutional authority that they were given to interpret the law. We think it's interpreted differently. It would be akin to someone in Alabama saying, I don't agree with the way Roe v. Wade was decided. I think we should go ahead and allow and violate state law to implement, Roe v. Wade. And these types of things don't happen. It would be a constitutional crisis. So again, that's another reason to call your local electeds and make sure they understand that you're paying attention. Because if you're paying attention, they're going to be concerned, and they're going to feel like they understand what's happening. And what they're really wanting to know is how much you care. Because if they don't think you care, it's easier for them to just not say a word about it and just let him get away with a lot of things. So, but it's a great question, Juan, and we are really tracking it closely.
There's folks out there with theories that that was the goal, right? To get it to the Supreme Court and have a more formalized expansion of powers. Is that your theory too?
I don't know. This issue went to the Supreme Court in Trump 1.0, and that they were struck down. The Health and Human Services at that time were forced to release funds that they were withholding for policy reasons. That is a different Supreme Court, right? It is, unfortunately. However, I'd like to think that they still care about the separation of powers, because in their more recent rulings, they've been actually taking more power back to the courts. not necessarily giving it to the executive. So it does remain to be seen, but I think that is the thought, that this administration has the Supreme Court in their pocket and they can bring it up to the Supreme Court and win. So we shall see.
Just one more follow-up on it. It says right now there's been orders on agencies, what are sort of broad entities, but at some point is violating the court order a personal liability issue where will a person be held accountable, or is it all at the entity level?
I mean, it's a great question as to whether or not an agency that's supposed to be doing it can, if you can hold the executive level officers accountable. I think we may end up seeing that play out in real time. I don't have the answer to that.
Okay. All right.
In criminal cases, like for example, against the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and others, where the head of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service was held legally liable. So there is precedent for it.
Okay, that's useful. Thank you. There's another question here about specific programs, and it may be that you don't know this level of detail, and that's okay. So she's asking Jillian or anybody present in the meeting, do we have an update on the current status of EECBG voucher programs? I'll say from my end, I used to talk a lot to the EECBG people, and I obviously don't much right now. I wonder if anybody else has experiences, or Jillian, if you have any intel on that program.
Well, I was just checking my Signal chat to see what latest updates I've got on this. Some of the rebates are actually being held. But EECBG, Department of Energy, has released quite a number of things today. So that's good news. There was guidance this morning. I'm just looking to see. Let's see. Just heard that in Arizona, they're frozen on home rebates and still frozen on EECBG. So that was as of 9 o'clock this morning. I don't know is the answer. I recommend you go to your the person who's managing that program and have them reach out to try and confirm.
All right, kind of test it yourself and see how far you can get.
And let us know. That's the whole point of the intake request, is for us to have that update on the ground. It's really chaotic right now. And the more that we're able to synthesize that information, I mean, that's the goal, is the shock and awe and chaos. But the more that we can organize through our database and other things, the more powerful our response will be.
Right, and you're kind of addressing, so here on the screen are just some of the things I've been compiling in all my various meetings I've been participating in on this, about the kinds of things communities feel like they could use that would be helpful. And I think you're doing one of this top one here, tracking the status of federal energy, climate, and environmental justice programs, whether the programs or portals are accessible for drawdown. So that's awesome. Is that something accessible to like publicly that we can see, or are you just tracking it internally right now?
Well, we've starting to just make one of those litigation chronologies just to help folks understand it. And if we get it to a place that feels good, I'm very happy to share it. It's not there yet. Right now, it's a lot of notes because things are moving so quickly.
Okay. Perfect. Okay. So we have another question. This one's about tax credits. What about tax credits put at risk because of regulations promulgated by agencies weakened by the Looper decision?
Yeah, the Loper-Bright decision, which basically, got rid of what was called the Chevron deference. It's so the idea you're suggesting is that Treasury would be issuing a regulation enforcing the tax credit, and some private entity would try and bring a claim against the regulation. So in this case, Loper-Bright would actually be turned on its head almost, because in that case, they weren't giving the deference to the federal agency, who here would have been Treasury and, putting out regulations that keep tax credits around. In a way, if Treasury does change regulations that take away tax credits, you can bet that there will be lawsuits citing Loper-Bright to say, no, we don't rely on the agency here. We rely on the law that exists that requires these tax credits. And court, you are now authorized under Loper-Bright to overrule the federal agency. Is how I think something like that might play out, if I understood the question correctly.
Thank you. Another question here from Alice. What recourse do folks have who submitted grants or prize applications to DOE last fall? They were supposed to announce awardees this month, but we haven't heard anything. And the website has changed slightly and is silent. Is there any closure?
Fortunately, Alice, that is what's being litigated primarily in the court. If it's been announced, or you've submitted grants and you haven't had any announcement yet, it's likely not going to be coming out anytime soon. It really depends on what program it fell under at DOE. If it is an IRA, IIJA funded program, it likely won't be announced at this time, unfortunately. If the litigation plays out and they're incredibly successful, it may be announced, but those are really harder to enforce. It's the legally obligated grants that have already been awarded and signed are much more protected.
Really sorry, everybody who's dealing with that. You guys
Oh,
know
I'm
I get
so
real,
sorry.
I get fired
I feel-
up about how
I
much
feel
time
like
we
I'm
waste
the
on
bearer of-
applications.
Yeah, I'm just a bearer of
Man.
bad news, but we have resources. It's just not.
Yep. Okay, let me continue along on some other questions. Yes, we will be sending all the links. You always get an email from us afterwards with all the follow-up information and materials, so don't worry. And the recording as well. Let's see here. Let's see. Hello, Angie. Okay. I think we're doing pretty good. So great to know Lawyers for Good Government is out there to help. I want to just emphasize that, and so grateful for your important work. Everybody's saying thank you so much. Fight the good fight. Okay, I have one last question for you, unless anybody else just wants to raise their hand and share more, either your experiences or more questions. But I've been thinking about the folks that are uncomfortable moving forward right now. So we know we want to stay in compliance, but we're also worried about expending more money that may not be repaid. And so is there any legal action folks can take to get some kind of compliance waiver to say, hey, you federal government created so much uncertainty, I couldn't move forward, and I want some kind of an exception.
Yes. In fact, let me see if I can just share it with you right now. If I have it handy, I will absolutely share it. We just came up with a template email that people can use to Kelly. I'm trying to Kelly McRae from our organization is on the call as well, helping put all these really helpful links in the chat. And Kelly, I'm trying to find the list of emails to see if we can share one of them for you. If I don't have it handy to share in this chat, Angie, we do have one. Bottom line, the template email, as I was saying before, bears repeating, is just, document. So it's language that cites the enforcement order that was issued yesterday and says there's no reason to pause our funds. Pausing the funds may cause us to miss a milestone, which could be viewed as a force majeure, which is what it's called in contract law. And so as a result, we either need you to immediately release our funds or give us a no-cost extension. So that's what the template is, and at least you can send that out to request that, and now you're documenting. In contract law, you typically need to document when you think a force majeure is happening. And so this is your notice to them that not only do you need your funds, but you need a no-cost extension, or they will be causing the breach of contract, not you, which is then going to allow you to sue later to get reimbursement of funds.
Okay, so helpful. Oh my gosh, what would we do without good guy lawyers? Good gal. All right. I want to rest assured everybody. So they've been so welcoming, so responsive at Lawyers for Good Government, along with EPN. And I'm hoping to just kind of keep tracking them and making sure I can take everything that they've got and put it into my tracker, but you're welcome to just go directly to their stuff as well. So I'll be working on, if you go to page 10 on the tracker that I put in the chat, that's a list of the resources and opportunities for your action that I am aware of today, but I'll go back and update that. I wanted to invite folks in the last couple of minutes of this discussion to share. There was a lot of resources shared beyond what you just heard and the support outlined. What else could help you? You see some of the things that this is like my wish list on the right. Like I wish some of these things existed, and some of them it looks like are in development. What else besides what we talked about today would help you? What's like an immediate or medium-term need? And just raise your hand if you have anything to share here. Maybe while folks are thinking, I'll ask you one more question, Jillian, which is, I know you probably hate crystal ball questions, But how likely do you think, so I know we're on a temporary restraining order and there's federal court orders sort of reinforcing it. But and that's only lasting for a couple weeks. How likely is it that we're going to see a longer freeze on the freeze, meaning like a pause on the freeze of funds? Like, and what could they do next? Is it just like another short-term extension?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't have a crystal ball, and I'll just have to say, using the term freeze, it's a really broad term, right? It really depends on the agency and the program. DOE is responding slightly differently than the USDA is, and EPA is being treated very differently than all of them. EPA is probably the hardest hit. So if you're relying on EPA grants, those are going to be probably the most vulnerable and the most challenged, I'll say, by this federal agency. So I think making sure you document and submit well in advance of potentially missing a milestone to track that, to make it really clear that this pause, this delay, this issue is now causing me to potentially miss a milestone. I need a no-cost extension. And that would be very, very helpful. I think so far, the courts have been extremely favorable to pausing the freeze. They see this as unconstitutional. They think it's inappropriate. Congress approved these laws, and until Congress says otherwise, they should be implemented. And so to the extent that the appellate level agrees with that, that we think that'll likely happen. But again, who knows, right? I can't a crystal ball. And then I think we're going to be just tracking very closely whether the Supreme Court decides to take on that case. If they do, that won't be the best sign. Typically they don't take up a case unless they want to kind of reevaluate what the lower court has done. So fingers and toes crossed that they leave it at the appellate level, and then we can just go about trying to really enforce these orders in each one of these grants. But remember that you do have legal claims and legal options individually. If you are owed on invoices of legally obligated grants, and there's some, illegal attempt to terminate or delay is causing a breach of contract, you do have individual breach of contract claims. If you have resources to go to attorneys or maybe even someone that could take it on retainer, you could certainly talk about an individual claim. And Angie, if this group has similarly situated claims, we can share them with our friends at Democracy Forward to maybe take a class action for similarly situated claims. There are additional lawsuits that we could potentially work with the litigators to bring. Something to consider.
How do they get that information to you? Just through the funding clinic link?
The form. Make sure they put it in their notes. Anything else they want to share, like I'd be interested in seeing what legal options are, and maybe a joint class action if it's relevant.
Okay, that's you guys are doing so much. I didn't hear from anybody about specific examples of what other things they need, probably because you're really covering it really well. If anybody is aware of other resources that you would like us to be tracking and think others could use, just send us a note. You can send it anytime. We're just trying to capture what's out there. I did see one other question here about EPA. So have you heard that EPA dispersed GGRF funds to a bank under a financing agreement? True? Are funds safe now? Yeah. Is it obligated and out of
So EPA was brilliant. Not all of GGRF funds did that. There are 3 buckets of GGRF funds. There's the Solar for All, where they did not do that. Then there's the 2 other buckets, the National Clean Investment Fund and the CCIA fund together, which are $20 billion. They did put those in trust for those national nonprofits to hold on to at Citibank. There was a memo last week that by the federal government saying that they are reviewing that for fraud and waste because they think that was an inappropriate move. But as of yet, those funds are still out of the federal government and in the hands of the Citibank trustee. So that's a great thing. We're continuing to feel like those funds are safer than others.
All right, thank you. Looks like we got a hand up with Robin. This will be our last question.
Yeah, thank you so much, Angie and Jillian and everybody on the call. This is really actually more of a expression of gratitude. The last 41 days or the first 41 days of this year have been ridiculous, especially if you live in LA. And so just having this webinar where there's like answers to all of the chaos and a way forward. It's just so appreciative. I can't express just how thankful I am for this webinar. So thank you.
Oh, Robin, I would hug you. Thank you so much. And I feel the same way. Being with you all makes me feel so much better. And Rochelle's actually going to drop the link to the huddle. So if you need more of this kind of being in community together and getting support from each other, just join us. It's informal. We call it a huddle. We're going to continue kind of tracking this federal stuff and ideally lifting each other up where we can.
Yeah.
I'm so grateful for this network. Jillian, I want to invite you to say any last comments and including how these communities that would really love to support what you're doing, how we can help you. It sounds like maybe the number one thing is just to tell you when we're experiencing stuff, but anything else?
Yeah, I appreciate that, Angie. And Robin, I feel that community so strong. That's been the one piece that helps me get through it, is the amount of community that's being formed and forged in fire, as it is literally in your case, of bonds that of how we get through this together. So thank you for saying that. In terms of what we could use, we can always use more funding. The need is so much more overwhelming than we ever thought it would be. We know that everyone is suffering with funding issues, so I hesitate to even say that. But if you're talking to like foundations or funders, we have a joint proposal with EPN that does need support, additional support, so we can meet the need. But secondly, make sure, and importantly, just make sure you complete those intake requests. And then the last thing, if you know of lawyers who are interested in helping out, we are going to be launching a larger effort to train up all those lawyers with all the resources we built to really offer that one-on-one service. So Kelly, I don't know if we have handy our survey form, but we'll definitely get it to you, Angie, that you can share with folks if they are interested in helping. They just clarify and how they are interested in helping, and they'll automatically be invited to join the trainings for our fund protection clinic. We would love to have more support. It's not rocket science, and you'll get the training you need to be able to support these communities in a more one-on-one basis.
Okay, everybody give a last, I don't know, a snap emoji or a clap in the chat to Jillian and Kelly and all the folks at Lawyers for Good Government for being with us. We really appreciate your time and know how busy you are. I have a couple of comments to close us out, and anybody who wants to hang around afterwards for our bonus breakout, that's our informal time, can do that. I have a couple more little updates for you. You all know we have our Seek Forum every single year. Hey, that's a chance to be in person together, and I am really looking forward to it. So the forum itself is, oh my gosh, I keep getting confused from June or July. June, right? Rochelle? No, July. Oh my gosh, I have a brain problem. July 9th, no, 8th and 9th. 9th and 10th. All right, there's too much going on. July 9th and 10th, it's in San Jose. But what I really wanted to tell you is that there is a deadline coming up for a session proposal. So if you would like to present and be one of those innovative case studies and best practices that we end up showcasing at our Seek Forum, then please do apply. So you can submit that by February 14th. That's this Friday. And we are going to, I think, have a very action-packed forum, hopefully full of a lot of progress you all are making on the ground. Alongside of that, there's some other regional-based in-person opportunities that I'm working on with the Governor's Office of Land Use and Climate Innovation and the Strategic Growth Council, and there's going to be some outreach about that really soon, but it's happening in late March. There's two coming to Southern California, one in San Diego and one in LA. Some of you have received an invitation to be part of a planning committee based on expressing some interest in that. So thank you all for doing that. More to come on that, but that's going to be a really great opportunity for us to get alongside our state agency friends and do as much as we can with what we have to coordinate to sort of continue to advance our energy, climate, and land use priorities together. Okay, so I just wanted to give you those couple of updates, and let's close ourselves out in the formal meeting. Our next meeting will be March 11th. I love it when folks reach out with ideas for what they would like to hear about, or if you have something you would like to present at one of these meetings, please do. You can always share this invitation with folks that you think would benefit from this kind of information. And we're just going to adapt with the way funding is changing and continue to be as a valuable hour for you as possible. I want to thank you for spending the time with us today. And if you have to go, to lunch or to your noon meeting, then please do. Otherwise, we're going to hang around for our informal bonus breakout. But stay safe out there, everybody. All right, can we go to our next slide? All right, I see some folks have to drop, and that's a-okay. But as always, folks have told us it's nice to have a little time after the formal meeting for a bonus breakout. It's just an informal discussion. You can offer an announcement, a success story, or an opportunity, share a need for information, collaborators, or advice, or you can raise a suggested topic for speaker or future learn. Or you may just want to take the conversation we just had into overtime. That's fine too. So I will be quiet for a minute and see if anything emerges. Raise your hand, drop it in the chat, whatever works for you.